Good, hi, and welcome. My name is Ty. I'm a breathwork facilitator, and this video is offered as a brief introduction to the breathwork journeying experience. Primary audience is for those who have already signed up for a session, whether it be a private or a group, online or in person, to give some context and some introduction to the technique and a bit of a lay of the land to support you in your journey experience. But if you happen to have just come across this video as well, hi and welcome, and happy to share a little bit about breathwork from my experience and point of view as a facilitator. So breathwork is a broad term that is used widely and generously by a lot of different types of practitioners and to achieve a lot of different effects kind of in the body and the psyche. So I'm a yoga teacher as well. You have kind of pranayama and yogic breathing techniques. You have folks that are doing breath training in terms of a physical performance and optimum oxygen absorption, looking at nitric oxide and optimal breathing through the nose and these types of things. And then you have this sort of category of conscious breathing practices that generally come out of holotropic breathwork and rebirthing breathwork that came to the forefront in the late 60s, early 70s with Stanislav and Christina Graf on the holotropic practice and modality, and Leonard Orr in rebirthing. So the foundation of that kind of category of what we might call over-breathing practices, where we're engaging a circular connected breath. That's what I'll be talking about here. So you can always reach out to me if you have any questions about yogic breathing or how over-breathing and conscious breathing practices compare or sit within that general landscape of breathwork. But for today, I'm going to be offering the technique that's used for conscious breathing, and again, some context to support your journey. So this type of breath is done generally reclined. This breath is done through your mouth, which again, day-to-day optimal breathing is through the nose for a variety of reasons. But for this practice, we're going to be doing a circular breath through the mouth. The technique is quite simple. So I'll offer two versions. One is a two-part inhalation followed by a passive exhalation. The inhale portion of this breath is more active, and then the exhale is more sort of like a passive deflate. We're not blowing the air out and engaging muscular contraction to try to empty our body completely of breath. The two-part breath, the first half is going to come into your abdomen, and the second part of the breath is kind of like a rolling wave, and it's going to come up into the area of your chest and like full 360 around your heart. And then the exhalation is going to be a passive deflate. For me, I'm kind of a visual metaphor person, and as if you had a loaf of bread baking in the oven and you opened the door too soon and it just deflated. And I'll explain why that type of exhale is something that I emphasize in just a moment. So that's the breath, very simple. Again, relaxed wide jaw, you're going to be generally laying down. And we can try it together here for a moment. And I'll try to breathe more audibly so you can track with me, and I'll use my hands to show the region, just so you can get a sense of the general cadence. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but you can kind of use this as a baseline and go slower or ramp it up a little bit depending on what feels right in your body and for you. So go ahead, and if it's helpful to put a hand on a belly, hand on heart, you're welcome to do so. We're going to go ahead and exhale out, and then breathe in belly, breathe in chest, and then out. That's it. Somewhere in that belly, chest, out. Belly, chest, out. And you can think of it like a infinity sign or like a swimmer doing laps at the pool. So there's not much pause between the inhale and the exhale. And as soon as the exhale drops, The inhale comes right on the heels. And if you're used to yogic breathing practices like Ujjayi, this is quite different in that we're not managing or controlling the exhale. We're not guiding it out. We're not or doing a long extended exhale. It has more the quality of a surrender and just a letting go and softening into the earth. And then the inhale into the belly, let it swell. Inhale into the chest. You might feel your rib cage expand, kind of in full 360. You might even feel widening all the way up through your throat and cranium, and exhale out. So that's the breath pattern I generally instruct, and I like to start with that breathing pattern. I just find that I can get into kind of a nice cadence and rhythm with it. If differentiating the breath into those quadrants and breathing first into the belly and second into the chest feels cumbersome, or you're tripping up on it, or you just feel like you want to explore a single inhalation, then you're going to take a single one-part inhale followed by a passive exhale. And so that would be just a general sense of the whole swell of your belly and your chest and the area around your midband and diaphragm. So that's rising. Somewhere in that general ballpark. In this breathing technique, we're not efforting or intending to get like 100% of our breath capacity, right? If you're sitting, say, at your email day to day, and you're breathing like your diaphragm, your respiratory diaphragm feels fairly stationary, you're not getting a lot of circulation, a lot of moving here. Maybe you feel like you're breathing 5% of your lung capacity in any given moment. We're just opening it up. So you might feel like you're stretching to 20%, 30%, 40%. And essentially, you just take it kind of gradually like that. So I again, kind of metaphor of like a riverbank. So the breath, as you start connecting with it and breathing in this way, you might feel areas of tightness or constriction where you just don't feel like you can actually take a deep breath. We don't need to struggle against that, right? So see, okay, I'm getting my diaphragm moving, I'm opening up the breath 5%, 10%. And it's like a babbling brook or a trickle, perhaps, that your breath was. All of a sudden, the riverbanks can widen a little bit, and there's a little bit more current that can flow. So you can start slower, you can start just breathing, noticing how you feel the breath and the current coming in. And as the session progresses, you might feel the breath expanding a little bit and the riverbanks widening, and a little more energy and volume of breath circulating and flowing. So that's the breathing technique. It's quite simple in practice, as long as we can kind of get out of our own way. You know, we don't need to strive to get it right. And it's not that we mimic hit a specific metronome of breath to achieve a very specific effect. Rather, this is an experiential journey. So imagine just kind of going with a sense of curiosity and exploration, kind of going to explore in the terrain of your body and your energy field and your psyche. So just take it one breath at a time. Be present with what's there. If your mind is busy, you don't need to fight against it to try to come into a meditative state. You can just kind of feel like, whoa, that is a busy mind that's happening up there. And keep kind of redirecting your awareness to the current in the river of breath. Again, you might kind of get distracted, you might be off in an eddy, and just know that you can always come back. Let your next exhale kind of wipe the slate clean so that you can be more available to the inhalation that follows. And in this way, we can really trust the breath to be our guide in this. We so often want to drive and arrive at some place, or break through some pattern, or kind of blast off and have an exalted peak experience. And so we can just kind of check and notice when that driving or over-efforting aspect is present. Notice, see if you can just let that part take a break, take a rest, and then feel the breath in your body and your somatic experience. So again, the breathing, and again, it's, there might be times where you feel like you really want to ramp up the breath, breathe a little more vigorously, maybe the music dynamic shifts and you just feel like you want to get big. Maybe sometimes you want to do a breath hold and just suspend and hover and feel vibration in your body. Feel what that feels like to be expanded and to kind of hold the breath for a moment. There might be times where you want to let the active breath go in the course of an hour journey and just feel and sense and be present in the experience. And then when that passes, you can return to the breath. So there's lots of room here to explore and to explore what happens when you ramp the breath up, to notice tendencies of sort of checking out and leaning out of the experience. So again, no right or wrong way to do it, no right or wrong experience. As we're breathing in this way, we can start to move a lot of energy in the body and things that were maybe held, or emotional energies that maybe haven't had an opportunity to be completed or fully processed. There's so many reasons why that would be. Just think about, like I lost a family member not that long ago with my grandmother. But I remember being at a grocery store, buying flowers, and the person asked me, asked me a question about it, and I could feel tears welling up, but I didn't want to have an emotional release in that context at the grocery store. And so I kind of held that emotional release back. And just think about all the times where there's been, maybe actually like anger or speaking our truth or being able to speak our experience and point of view. And based in the circumstances of a relational field or context, we weren't able to do that. So we've swallowed something. There's been a movement from our belly and our gut and our heart that wasn't able to be voiced. And that's just two examples, but in so many ways we're conditioned, and this is true for different populations of people as well, right? To not express our fullness, our certain emotions, certain energies. And so all of that kind of conditioning is stored in the body, let alone just stress, right? And all the ways that we contract and grip and brace and in a way freeze in response to energies that feel overwhelming to process, or that we may not have the window of sort of capacity to be able to meet in the moment. And this could literally be something as simple as driving around in heavy traffic and in the rain, in the dark, and being concerned about pedestrians and cyclists and the stress that we kind of hold. And so all of that accumulated in the body is kind of held in our tissues. So when we start opening the diaphragm, get more suppleness and movement, we start kind of unwinding and moving some of that energy, a lot of it can be released. And in breath work, this could happen through your body might want to move. There might be raw energy kind of that comes through that is helped by making sound. So I encourage you, again, if your body needs to move, if you need to like pound your fists at the sky, if you want to contract and release, if you want to move your jaw, a lot of sometimes the energies of like anger or repressed frustration and these types of things are like kind of our warrior energy can get, that if it's unexpressed, can kind of get trapped in the jaw and throat, right? So making sound, if you can, opening your mouth, doing like a toning sound. You can make an ah sound, and you can growl and yee. And all of that is helpful to allow energy to move in this experience as things are getting stirred up and have an opportunity to be expressed and completed. And so you might find that there's emotional movement. You might all of a sudden feel tears coming, or there might be a wave of grief or sadness that just needs to roll through, like tears that just need to be shed. And so just know that as we kind of get into the breath work, those types of processes can be catalyzed. And we don't need to make a story about it. We don't need to hold it back. So to whatever degree it's possible, just to let those energies move. If there's anger there, that's okay. Give it some sound, give it some movement, give it a visualization of what that anger wants to do, right? And so as we're breathing in this way also, sometimes if the breath is more vigorous and if there is a more active exhalation, like a we are blowing out quite a bit of carbon dioxide, right? And so your body might experience more of those hypoxic symptoms of hyperventilating in a way, right? So you might experience a little cramping in your hands or a little puckering of your cheeks. That's called tetany. And it's temporary drop in calcium levels. And again, these smooth muscle contractions that can happen when the blood gases start to shift, when those oxygen and CO2 levels start to shift a little bit. For most people, in most conditions, totally safe, totally fine as a byproduct of this experience and the duration that we're breathing. So if that happens and it becomes challenging for you in your experience, if it becomes painful, if it's detracting you from the richness of your experience, ease off the breath. Just relax for a little bit, breathe through your nose, let go of the active breathing, let that subside a little bit, and then you can enter back in. And you can also just give awareness to easing off the exhale and doing your, seeing what you can do to relax the exhalation. So you might feel sensation, you might feel like electricity, that type of feeling. I mean, you might just become aware of literally the voltage, like the energy that we carry through our human form. So you might feel that. Again, you might feel some cramping in certain areas. You might feel temperature change as states of arousal shift. But essentially, there can be kind of a charge in our sympathetic nervous system. And then there can be this release that happens. And this is similar, like if we go to the gym, we start working out, we start to sweat a little bit, and that catalyzes a metabolic process. And then usually after the gym, we feel great, right? There's a relaxation. It's like we've worked out some of that pent-up energy. And the same holds true for this type of active breath work. Also, like orgasm, you know, there can be energy building, a bit of a release, and then there's a deep relaxation. So that's okay if there is a bit of a sympathetic response in the nervous system. From there, people generally have, again, this experience of transitioning into a state of deep rest. From a nervous system perspective, this could be more of that parasympathetic state of kind of rest and renew and digest. From polyvagal theory, it's more of that ventral vagal feeling of connection and oneness, and might be experienced as heart opening, this type of thing. So there's lots of different terrain here that a breathwork journey can take you to. And again, you know, it's kind of moving through sometimes some of these layers where these bigger energies might move. But generally speaking, that will support kind of shifting more into that parasympathetic deep rest. So that's from kind of more of a physiological and somatic perspective. And another thing in breath work that is the reason a lot of people come to this practice is that it can catalyze an expanded state of awareness, or just a change in the way that our neural networks are usually firing, right? So we can kind of get out of our own routinized patterns. And people, myself included, can often see things and have insights and vantage and illumination on relationships in their lives, on their creative projects, on their literally their life purpose, or clarity or inspiration about what has life in you and what is wanting to be expressed and what wants attention. So I find that it can bring a lot of clarity amidst a general sense of maybe confusion or despondency or just feeling flat. And it can, and some people experience that as a spiritual experience. So they might have sort of vision visionary type experiences, or again, just sort of insight that feels like wisdom that comes from a much deeper place. So that could show up in your breathwork journey as well. And if there's if there's beautiful insight coming, be with that, receive it, learn from it. If you find that your mind is going more into like mental patterns, you'll know, and then you can re-emphasize the breath to kind of switch out of that and come back into more of a bodied experience. So that's kind of a general overview. I just want to make sure here if there's anything else that I wanted to share. And I guess briefly, just in terms of helpful orientations coming into your breathwork experience. Again, be aware of the one who strives. Kind of let the white knuckling of the steering wheel go. Relax. And there's almost a sense that the breath is breathing you. So sometimes simply the orientation of receiving a breath rather than taking a breath can be very helpful. So instead of like sucking and pulling in a breath, it's more like a receiving. I used to give the analogy of like you've just climbed to the top of a mountain. It's the most beautiful view you've ever seen. And just like saturating the breath and letting it soak into kind of the deepest terrain of your body and your psyche and your soul. To relax periodically, especially if you notice that in the breath work, if you're kind of tightening around it, or you feel your back muscles, the muscles that go along your spine, if you feel like you're arching, if you feel like you're tightening, let your next exhale fully relax. Relax your belly and your abdomen, relax your back muscles, and allow the next inhalation to be more of a sense of soaking and saturating, more so than a tightening and pulling. So every so often, do a sighing, relaxed exhale, and that will help things unwind. And then there's actually going to be so much more space for the inhale to flow from there, as opposed to kind of more of a tighter system, if that makes sense. And go at your own pace, right? So if it feels overwhelming, ease off. If it feels like too much, it is. We want to kind of ride that threshold edge where we can still integrate and be present with our experience and not kind of shift into a hyper aroused state where we're in a panic mode or that type of energy. And so we want to kind of be mindful about riding that edge. And so if it feels like too much is happening, ease off the breath, let it scale back a little bit, and then re-engage and explore that window. Also, just be aware that sometimes there's big releases. Sometimes I give the metaphor of a river system, and sometimes there might be a dam with a lot of logs, right? And sometimes, the breath, again, it's just getting a little bit more flow happening into places that had previously been kind of disassociated or offline. Sometimes a lot of logs come out of that kind of jam, that knot of tension, and there's a big release. And so just know that either one of those experiences is beautiful and productive. Sometimes it's a big release, sometimes it's more mild in that way, and there's just a little bit more connection happening. So we don't need to effort towards a peak experience, just knowing that opening up the diaphragm, opening up the breath, getting more connection to the body is a beautiful thing. I just want to say quickly too on setup. Generally lying down, if you have a sense of low back, you might prop your knees up on something or bolster under your knees, just so that your low back can settle in a little bit. If you feel reclined, if you feel like being at a slight incline would be optimal to open up your breath a little bit more. You can also prop yourself up on a bolster or a back jack and be a little bit more at an angle upright. You're going to want a lot of cushion, kind of like a sheepskin or something underneath you. The journeys that I lead are about 60 minutes, an hour. So you'll want cushion under yourself. You'll want a couple blankets nearby. Again, body temperature can change, and you want to be comfortable and cozy. So hooded sweatshirt, blankets to put on, kick off, that type of thing. You're going to want a thin pillow under your head, or no pillow at all. We don't want to seal off the neck. So enough that you can still feel wide jaw and relax wide kind of channel through your throat and ear all the way down to your belly. You might have a rolled towel underneath your neck. That might feel just nice under the curve, the cervical curve of your neck and spine. So you can put a rolled towel under that. I think that's it. Loose clothing, you don't want any tight pants, no jeans that are tight, no bra band or that type of thing. You want to be able to feel able to expand and not being restricted by clothing. So I think that's it in terms of prop and setup. For audio, there's going to be music playing, so I recommend earphones, headphones, or a good external sound system as opposed to your device audio. So you want a good full immersive experience in that way. If you're doing a session with me, you can have your, and we're online, definitely keep your mic muted so you can, this is in group sessions, you can make as much sound as you'd like. And you're welcome to keep your camera on or off, whatever supports you in relaxing. On that note, you should do these sessions in a space that you feel safe in and that you feel like no one's going to walk in, because to be able to relax and go into a deeper state, we need that sense of safety and security, and that you can, the parts of you that are normally on guard can relax a little bit. So do find a space that feels sacred, private, that you can go into a deeper immersive journey. And then just finally, two things in terms of, again, this type of process is generally okay for most bodies, most conditions, physical, psychological states. However, there's some conditions that we want to be mindful of, or that may require modification to that sort of more activated over-breathing technique. So that would be pregnancy, if you're pregnant. Again, this process, calcium levels can drop temporarily. There can be some muscular contraction with the tetany. And again, that's generally if you're breathing more vigorously, but still possible, especially if you don't have a facilitator who is right there watching your breath and can see very closely what's happening. So I generally recommend that women who are pregnant don't do this type of breathing activity, or if you still want to be in the space and modify to just make it more of a gentle meditative breathing experience as opposed to the more kind of over breathing active dynamic breath. And then also certain psychological kind of states, which could be if there's schizophrenia or unmedicated bipolar disorder. You know, this process can be ego transcending and can ramp energy up. So if there is any concern that it might be destabilizing to kind of a baseline that is healthy for you, or you know, any concern that ramping the energy up in this way might initiate more of a manic state, then that's something we want to be aware of as well. Severe kind of like high blood pressure would be another thing that we want to consider. And then those are kind of the main ones. Epilepsy would be another. So if these are part of your experience, I would encourage you to reach out to me if I'm your facilitator or your facilitator prior to engaging the work, so you can have a conversation, get the information you need to be able to assess. We are not able to assess you and do a medical history, right? So that's important that we can give you information that you and your medical practitioner can make an assessment from. And then in terms of integration following a session, it can be nice to journal and just to leave space after a session, to journal, to write, to meditate. Maybe you want to dance and be in your body in that way. Sometimes going for a slow walk outside, just connecting to nature. Generally speaking, it can be challenging to go from this type of expanded deep state to having to socialize or go to work commitments or family commitments, and more cerebral verbal processes immediately following. So do your best to give yourself that time for integration. A warm bath, Epsom salt bath can also be helpful. And you're going to want to drink a lot of water. You can think of like if you just got a deep tissue massage where they're working out tension, knots, physical knots, toxins can be released. In a similar way, that's what we're doing with this active breathing. It's like a deep tissue massage on an energetic level. So a good amount of water can just continue and support that process. So that's it. I look forward to facilitating and just sharing the breathwork journey with you. It's powerful, powerful medicine that I have found so helpful for me over the past decade, and I am just continuously blown away and awed and inspired by the wisdom and the profound experiences that my clients have in this work. So I'm so happy you found your way to breathwork. And please reach out if you have any questions. I'd be happy to jump on a one-on-one and share additional insights and answer any questions you may have about breathwork. All right, thank you so much. Take good care.